50,000 people in Leipzig. 50,000. Honecker heard of it, and he told people, he said live, he said, I'm ordering more blood to the hospitals in Leipzig, and I'm ordering the East German army into Leipzig to stop this protest. Anyone who takes to the streets is taking their life in their hands. The threat was clear. Remember I took you to the Luftwaffe building? Well, that's where the communists had gunned down 300 people on the streets. They were getting ready to do it again, and that was what Honecker directly said. Okay? It came to Monday evening, and at 6 o'clock in the evening, the people of Leipzig kissed their families goodbye, said bye to their mates, and left their houses. They knew the risks, they knew exactly what was going on, but they took to the street anyway. And they took to Leipzig Center Street, and 50,000 people linked arms, and they marched up the street, singing, Wir sind das Volk, we are the people. They've been told for much too long by the communists that we're doing this for the people, we're doing that for the people. They were saying, we are the people, we're here, do it for us. Because they're singing, Wir sind das Volk. And at the end of the road, the East German army was waiting for them in a barricade. And the marchers marched, and the army waited. And they got within about 10 meters of the army. And then the crowd stopped. All the chanting ceased. And there was a tense, very pregnant 10-second silence, when all you could hear was the kind of silent prayer coming from the crowd and the cocking of rifles from the East German army's barricade. And then something really strange happened. One of the protesters walked forward, and he turned to both sides and he said, everyone calm down, we're all Germans. The weirdest thing happened. Everyone did, okay? The East German army turned around and started marching with the crowd. Now, if you'd have been an East German there, you know, nothing like this has ever occurred. The state never gave in. But here, with the state's troopers, the armed representatives of the state on the street, turning around and marching with you, they said that they knew it was over at that night in Leipzig. It's a candlelit parade, and people still talk about it. East Germans will still call Leipzig the city of heroes, because it really was. The next week in Leipzig, they have a 200,000 man protest, okay? It's huge. Now this is the end for Mr. Honecker. Honecker, it's clear the army aren't obeying him. So the Communist Party go, well, listen Honecker, the people don't like you, the army don't like you, and we don't really like you much anymore. See ya. And they throw him out. They get a new guy in called Krenz, who takes over. But really, it's getting too late for all that kind of claptrap now. 200 people march in Leipzig the next week, sorry, 200,000 people march in Leipzig the next week. And on November the 4th, there's an 800,000 man protest just across the bridge there by the TV tower in Alexanderplatz of East Berlin. What can you do against 800,000 people? The government now says, well, listen, we're going to have to do something. I mean, we can't shoot all these people. It's nearly 1 million, for Christ's sake. So they get into a little room, the 7 top guys in the government of East Germany, and they scheme about what they're going to do. They spend a week there, and they come up with all these different ideas. Okay, they go over every single possibility. They toy with the idea of building more wall, building it higher, demolishing it completely, giving in to the west. Just every single idea is voted. Then at the end of the week, they come up with one idea they think will work. They say, well, okay, people want to go to the west. Well, we'll tell them that they can go to the west. We'll say they can go to the west for 1 month if they like. But you have to have a passport. That was the catch, because only 5% of the population at that point actually had a passport. And the East German governments controlled who else was able to get one. So really, what they were saying is, we'll make it look as if we're giving some reform, but we're holding on to the old lever of power anyway. Now, this was big news anyway, okay? This announcement they're going to do, big news. So they decide to hold a press conference. For the press conference, and this is only the second press conference East Germany had ever held. For the press conference, they get a guy in called Günter Schabowski. Schabowski, well, he's a bit of a beer-swilling idiot, but somehow he's made it to the top of the Communist Party, okay? God knows how. He hasn't even been at these meetings for the last week, okay? He's been playing golf in Poland. We saw his house earlier on. Günter Schabowski, big fat guy, lovely guy though, but just not good at his job, like so many people. Anyway, he comes back into town and the communists say, well, listen, Schabowski, you've been away farting around playing golf, so listen, here you go, you can give this press conference. and announce the new travel arrangements. Schabowski says, well, okay, fair enough, I guess so. Sounds like a good idea. Now remember, the world's finest journalists have turned up at East Berlin for this press conference. They're waiting for this really seminal announcement, something really new. Schabowski goes in, and before he goes in, his secretary hands a big pile of notes to him. These notes just have all the ideas that they've gone through in this meeting, you know, like building the wall higher, all sorts of things. Now, she hands all these notes to him. On the top was a piece of paper with one of the ideas on it, okay? And it just said, end all travel restrictions. Just that. It was just an idea jotted down on paper. Now, Schabowski takes all these notes and he throws them in the back of his file. He doesn't really care about that sort of stuff. He goes in and he sits down at the desk, and the journalists brighten up immediately. They're waiting for something expectantly huge. Schabowski proceeds to give the most dull 3-hour monologue you can possibly imagine. He goes through all the old propaganda, the East German crap. All the questions are scripted. You're not allowed to ask a question that isn't written by the government. So there's nothing new they can learn. They're learning nothing from this. Half the journalists actually leave halfway through this press conference. After about 3 hours, there's only a few people left. One of the journalists, an Italian guy actually, decides to shake it up a little bit. He's really pissed off. He's come all the way from Milan, leaving his girlfriend behind, and he's had to pay for it himself because he's a freelance journalist. So he decides, you know what, screw it, I'm going to ask my own question. So he puts up his hand and he says, Mr. Schabowski, what are you going to do about travel arrangements? Schabowski's a little bit sort of put out at this comment. He's kind of like, He's not really used to being asked questions that aren't written down for him. So what he does is he looks through his notes to buy himself some time, and he sits there shuffling his papers. Then it hits him. He's heard that phrase before. Travel restrictions. Sweet, okay. Right, it was on a piece of paper. He reaches to the back, the big pile of notes he was given, and that piece of paper is sitting there. And it just says, end all travel restrictions. Schabowski has a think to himself. Now, it's been about a minute since this question was asked, and he thinks, I don't really want to look stupid. In the absence of anything else to say, he just reads out what's on the paper. He says, East Germany has decided to end all travel restrictions. Bang, it's like a thunderclap hits the room. People are up. They were half asleep before, but they're up now and they're asking questions. They're on the phone back to HQ. Hands up, Mr. Schabowski, is this going to include Berlin? Schabowski says, God, he's kind of aware he's made a sort of mistake right now. He's thinking I can get out of this. But in the absence of anything else to say, he's not really sure. So he just says, yeah, it includes Berlin, of course. Just decides to buy himself some time. Then there's more questions hit him, and they're unrelenting. Mr. Schabowski, when are we putting this great, travel restriction plan into operation? At this point, Schabowski could have saved everything. If he'd have just said anything, if he'd just said oh, we'll have another press conference on that next week, or if he'd said, come find me afterwards and I'll tell you, or we'll put out a press release next week, or just even if he'd said nothing, things might have been different. But he didn't want to look stupid. He didn't want to look like he hadn't thought about it. So he looks around for a date. There's nothing on the walls, there's no calendars, but there is one date. It's on that piece of paper that served him so well. It's in the top right-hand corner. It's today's date. So in the absence of any other ideas, Schabowski just says, as far as I'm aware, ab sofort, or immediately. If a thunderclap hit the room a couple of minutes before, it's a full-on tempest now. People are up, they're back on the phone, phoning up their bosses in London. Remember, this is live on TV and radio, okay? Now picture yourself in East Berlin in your crappy little sort of 5-room apartment sharing with 10 other people, okay?